Makueni and Kitui counties. Speaker, I would have expected the CS to begin actually by apologizing for attempting to mislead the House and the country on the status of this dam. But that be as it may be, Mr. Speaker, my question is on the initial cost of the dam. He says that the height was adjusted from 77.8 to 80.5. And then in the process of construction, they realized that there was a weak foundation on the dam, which needed deeper excavation. As this resulted in variations on the cost of the project, and if yes, what is the variation and what is the government doing about that? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable CS, you may now proceed to respond.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The first question by Honorable Manzo was what was the component, bearing in mind that the dam is funded by the government of Kenya and also the African Development Bank. The government of Kenya has funded the project by 6.782 billion. And the African Development Bank is meant to fund the project to a tune of 35.583 billion Kenya shillings. The issue of compensation again for the remaining PAPs, Honorable Speaker, to the Honorable Dan Manzo, is that there are two families yet to be compensated, and this was because of a land succession dispute in the family. And these cases are ongoing, but the money for their compensation is with the National Land Commission. So once there is agreement, the two families will be duly compensated. Yes, there is the concern by Honorable Senator Kadhuri on the status of all projects, dam projects. If the Speaker allows, we can have a list of all dams ongoing and the amount of money required. And thank you for the gesture, because we actually need resources for us to complete those dams. The question by Honorable Mdigi from Embu. Honorable Senator, through the Speaker, you are welcome to the ministry for us to have an engagement to give you the actual status of those 3 dams you have highlighted. And then there is the question by Honorable Wambua. Honorable Speaker, yes, there was 2 challenges because of the raise in embankment, and also there was the challenge of a weak foundation at the river bed, and this resulted to cost implications, generally as it is in engineering projects, and the cost of increase in height. And just to put it in perspective, whenever there is an height increase, there is more impoundment of water, because now the dam, the wall can retain more water. And also that has a cost implication in the increase of height, and the expanded dam now footprint was to a tune of around 2.4 billion. And then there was a question on the weak rock at the riverbed, and this required removal and treatment of the weak rock. That had a cost of 432 million, and that is clarified. Thank you, Speaker. I submit.
Yes, Senator Enoch. The question by Senator Enoch was on the depth, the original depth of this particular dam, which was later varied. Did that come with additional costs, and therefore was there a variation of the contract to accommodate that? That was the question.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And yes, because of the increase in height, there is a cost implication for us to have more impoundment based on the surface runoff from the other catchment. And the cost implication is 2.4 billion Kenya shillings, and this was done in the year 2017.
So, Mr. Speaker, arising from that response, then my concern, and I believe this will be the concern of the public, is on those two components, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of the height and the weak foundation. I'm very sure there is money that must have been paid by government to do feasibility study on this project. And the issue of how deep to excavate must be part of that costing. So who is bearing the cost of that deeper excavation? Is it the government component, or is it that now we are going to, as the ADB, to give us a bigger loan to do this project? The Speaker, the variation on this dam, in my own estimation, the Speaker, is talking about 2.4 billion just for the height, and another 432 million for the deeper excavation. Who is bearing that cost?
Honorable CS and Senator Mugaa, I will allow you to get away with this. You are only allowed to ask one supplementary question. But due to public interest principles, I'll allow the Honorable CS to proceed to respond. Proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And to give a perspective over the question and clarity, is that whenever there is a variation in this project, we have to seek concurrence from Africa Development Bank. I'm informed that when this happened, concurrence was sought from Africa Development Bank, and they gave a no objection. And when you raise the dam from 77.5 to 80.5 meters, you retain more, which is the purpose of the dam, water harvesting from our catchment. And yes, whenever there is such a change, there is a cost implication, and that concurrence is always sought from the bank that does usual and routine contract appraisals and gives no objections. I submit.
Lastly, Senator Omtata.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The Honorable CS has referred to an IDB loan. I would like to know whether that loan is an A in A, an appropriation in aid, or whether money was given directly to the government of Kenya and it was put in the consolidated fund and is being supervised by the control of budget. And if it's an A in A, what is the justification of a bank getting into an A in A A in A arrangement for financing the Tuya Dam? That's my question, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honorable CS, you may proceed to respond.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and thank you, Honorable Mtata. Yes, the loan from Africa Development Bank is a concessional loan in form of A&A, whereby the money certificates are paid by the bank, not by the ministry, upon approval. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable CS. We will now move to question number 024. Honorable CS, you are free to leave.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, honorable members. I appreciate.
Senator Omtata, we have released the Honorable CS. Absolutely, Honorable Omtata, please. Honorable CS, welcome to the Senate. You're here for purposes of responding to question number 024 by the Senator for Kisumu County, the Honorable Professor Tomojenda. I'm informed that Senator for Nairobi, you're holding brief for the Senator for Kisumu County. You may therefore proceed to ask the question on his behalf.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The Senator for Kisumu assures me that he's no more than 5 minutes away, but we can't keep the House waiting. So I'll proceed to ask the questions in his stead. This is question number 24 by the Senator for Kisumu County, Senator Tom Ojenda SC. Number 1, could the Cabinet Secretary clarify whether the Kenya Defence Forces monitors the security situation within the country and indicate the state of preparedness of the KDF to address potential instability or civilian unrest? Number 2, what are the modalities for the involvement of KDF in internal security matters, and how does KDF balance the internal security needs of the state and the sanctity of civilian lives when dealing with internal instability and unrest? Lastly, Honorable Speaker, what measures has the ministry put in place to ensure that future involvement of KDF in addressing instability or civilian unrest is timely to avert civilian deaths that may arise from the shortcomings of the National Police Service as was witnessed during the June, July, and August 2024 demonstrations. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable CS, you may proceed to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me say that I'm glad to be back in this House in my new role as the Cabinet Secretary for Defense. And it's obviously because I like to associate myself with the Senate, having been a member, though very briefly. Mr. Speaker, I'll go straight to responding to the questions raised by Senator Professor Tom Ojenda, Senator for Kisumu County. I will not repeat the questions as have been already espoused by Senator for Nairobi. And Mr. Speaker, I will start by stating that the mandate of KDF as defined in the Constitution is in three parts, Mr. Speaker. And I'm making reference to Article 241, 3, A, B, and C of the Constitution. And the three parts within which the mandate of KDF is defined, the first one being what is really the primary mandate of the Kenya Defense Forces, is the defense and protection of the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of the Republic of Kenya. The other two parts, Mr. Speaker, which you will allow me to call secondary mandate of the KDF, is one, is to assist and cooperate with other authorities in situations of emergency or disaster. And three, deployment to restore peace, the deployment of the Kenya Defense Forces to restore peace in any part of Kenya affected by unrest or instability, and this only happens with the approval of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, that is what I will start by bringing to the fore. And whereas the questions asked by the Senator of Kisumu County may look very obvious, I think these are issues which are very pertinent and very of great concern, public concern by Kenyans, because in many instances we have heard Kenyans asking why or how the KDF is deployed with regard to internal matters of internal security. And to go to the first question on the need to clarify whether KDF monitors the security situations within the country, and we are required to indicate the state of preparedness in KDF address to potential instability or civil unrest. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Defense Forces is one of the three national security organs established under the Constitution. This is in addition to the National Police Service and the National Intelligence Service. And our Constitution does define national security to include the protection against internal and external threats to Kenya's territorial integrity and sovereignty, its people, their rights, freedoms, property, peace, stability, and prosperity, as well as other national interests. So, Mr. Speaker, by dint of that definition, constitutional definition of what national security is, and being that the Kenya Defense Forces are part of the three national security organs, therein lies the role of KDF in matters of national security. And whereas the primary responsibility for internal security does lie with other specialized agencies, and these are the National Police Service and the National Intelligence Service, where internal threats to the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Kenya arise, the Constitution then makes provision for instances when KDF may be deployed internally. And it therefore follows that for KDF to be effective or to effectively discharge this mandate of involvement in internal security matters, it must retain situational awareness and on internal security issues at all times. And due to the fact that KDF will mainly work in support of other agencies with regard to internal security matters, the force then has to closely collaborate and regularly exchange information with the relevant agencies. Mr. Speaker, again, in response to this question on whether the KDF does monitor internal security matters, when you look at the design of the National Security Council as established by the Constitution, KDF is a member through myself as the Minister for Defense and the Chief of the Defense Forces. And you will know, Mr. Speaker, and the House does know, that the National Security Council does involve all the security agencies and organs of this country, and that therefore mandates KDF to work very closely in coordination and cooperation with other security agencies. We also have the National Security Council Committee, where we have the KDF represented, and this Security Committee is the supportive arm of the National Security Council. And then again, Mr. Speaker, it follows that because of the involvement of KDF in these very crucial national security units, that indeed we have a pulse at each and every aspect of the internal security of the country. Mr. Speaker, and at this point, I will move on to, again for clarity, on the instances of the deployment of KDF under the Article 2413B, which speaks to the collaboration between KDF and other security agencies. An example of this deployment is the Operation Maliza Uhalifu in the North Rift, as well as the Northern Eastern Region operation. And of course, of keen interest is the deployment of June 25th, which again falls under Article 2413B, where KDF was deployed to offer support to the National Police Service to deal with the unrest that the country went through at that point. An example of a deployment of KDF to respond to that is Article 241(3)(c), which is to restore peace in any part of Kenya, and this is where the express authority of Parliament has to be sought. An example of that is the Operation Amani Boni, which is currently ongoing. Mr. Speaker, going to question 2, and I will come back to how the KDF operates within these deployments later, but allow me to go to question 2, which is asking on what the modalities for involvement of KDF in internal security matters is. Mr. Speaker, aside from the provisions of the Constitution, we have the Kenya Defense Forces Act, which elaborately enumerates requirements for KDF participation in internal security operations. Under the Constitution, the KDF is strictly bound by the principles of national security as defined under Article 238 of the Constitution, which is they have to be subject to the authority of the Constitution and Parliament, and that the national security activities must be carried in strict compliance with the law and with utmost respect for the rule of law, and that in performance of its functions and exercise of their powers, the KDF shall respect the diverse culture of the communities within Kenya. Mr. Speaker, again on the modalities, under the KDF Act, the Cabinet Secretary at any one time is required to furnish the National Assembly with reports on deployments under Article 241, 3B and C, as I have already stated. And these reports to Parliament are required to have the details as to the reason for deployment, the place and duration of deployment, as well as the expenditure to be incurred. Mr. Speaker, again, where KDF is deployed to restore peace in areas affected by unrest, that is under 241(3)(c), the Chief of the Defense Forces is responsible for the administration, control, and overall superintendence of the operation. But where KDF is deployed in a joint operation in support of the National Police Service and other authorities in situations of emergency, the Inspector General of the National Police Service shall be responsible for the control and overall superintendence of the operations. And again, to bring it closer home, an example of Operation Amani Boni, the Chief of the Defense Forces is responsible for the administration, control, and overall administration. In the other examples given, Operation Maliza Uhalifu in the North Rift, the Inspector General of Police is responsible for the control, and the KDF just comes in to offer support. Mr. Speaker, to focus on internal deployment in support of the National Police Service, other statutory regulations and measures that need to be instituted includes compliance with the constitutional standards, requirement for the Cabinet Secretary to, within 24 hours, issue a notice in the Gazette on the commencement of such deployment, and do the same upon discontinuation. Deployment and discontinuation, again, may be performed only in areas and places where the National Security Council and the President may determine. So the areas of deployment cannot therefore be arbitrary. They are guided by the National Security Council accordingly. There is a code of conduct that must be adhered to, in the which details the operational procedures and regulation of the defense forces. The law also stipulates that in such deployments in support of the National Police Service, the KDF personnel shall have same powers and exercise same duties as those of the National Police Service members. The KDF personnel also are required to undergo prior training before deployment. Mr. Speaker, I'll move to question 3 on what measures the ministry has put in place to ensure that the future involvement of KDF in addressing instability or civilian unrest is timely, to avert death that may arise and from the shortcomings of the other national security institutions. Mr. Speaker, in response to question 3, the KDF is structured to ensure continuous state of mission readiness, allowing for swift and effective response to both external and internal threats when the need arises. However, in its participation in internal security operations, these are carefully guided by the Constitution and the KDF Act, which specify notifications through Gazette notice, authorization to be sought prior to the deployment, and the mandatory reports to be furnished to the National Assembly, and of course, close collaboration and cooperation with the necessary security institutions. Question 4, Mr. Speaker, on how the KDF does balance the internal security needs of the state and the sanctity of civilians' lives when dealing with internal instability or unrest. Mr. Speaker, the involvement of KDF in internal security matters, as I have said, is governed under the Constitution and the law, KDF Act. Section 3 of the Act provides that KDF shall, in fulfilling its mandate, observe and uphold the Bill of Rights, values and principles under the Constitution in terms of striving for the highest standards of professionalism and discipline among its members. KDF is also to comply with constitutional standards of human rights and fundamental freedoms and dignity, as well as the requirement for sufficient training of staff before such deployments. Mr. Speaker, guided by the aforesaid constitutional and statutory dictates, the KDF is deeply committed to professionalism and operates within customary rules of engagement that prioritize the protection of civilians. And this approach entails the employment of non-lethal methods whenever possible, and the use of minimum force consistent with the achievement of the mission in accordance with the laid out standard operating procedures. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Tomo Jenda, you may ask your 2 supplementary questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a follow-up supplementary question. Let me thank the CS Defense, Madam the Honorable Soipan Tuya, Senator, for the response to the structured questions. However, Mr. Speaker, just one question I want the CS to highlight. No doubt, Mr. Speaker, reference is made to parliamentary approval for intervention and to keeping with the tenets under Article 241(3) and the involvement of the National Security Council where there are threats for internal intervention. I want the CS to clarify, and this is the delicate line, between inability of the National Police Service to deal with internal strife and the point at which the KDF will intervene, because when answering question 3, I think you have not dealt with the question of threshold. At what point is it deemed fit for KDF to intervene when there's a real threat and the National Police Service is unable to contain the threat? And I'm asking this, Mr. Speaker, because at times an intervention can be a little too late. And lastly, Madam CS, I've seen other jurisdictions like Burkina Faso, where security, I think, is interpreted to include food security, security in a wider sense. And KDF, the KDF of that country, is involved, spends most of its time in food production, other than, whatever it is, spends more time in food production and other activities other than just staying in the barracks until there is a threat of security to the country. Is there anything that we can do to ensure that our forces do other things, to ensure that we take care of the other issues, other security issues, other than simply fighting?
Honorable CS, note down those 2 questions. You will take more, and then when you rise to respond, you respond to them at a go. Senator Sifuna.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam CS, I saw a very curious statement from your ministry on the 17th of March 2025, regarding the circumstances surrounding the deployment of KDF in July of 2024. As you know, I am a firm believer in the freedom of the media. And we must accept that we were all very concerned to see the army in the streets after the protests. And my party leader has addressed certain possibilities given histories in other places, including Sudan and Egypt. What, in your view, or in the view of the ministry, was inaccurate in the report by the Daily Nation regarding the very possibility of this country being handed over to the military in the event the regime collapsed in July of 2024? So you need to tell us, because the statement said that the report by the Daily Nation was false, baseless, misleading, and reckless. Please explain to me what was the basis of that conclusion by your ministry. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Chute Mohammed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me thank the CS for her eloquency, and we are really proud of you. My question would be a bit of our discussion today. There is a court case. No. Let me align it back again, please, Honorable Speaker. I am bringing it back. There is a court case that was brought by one Mr. Murusi in Karare on the land that was acquired by KDF. And the court ruled that KDF should vacate that property. Can the minister please tell us what action she has taken so far? Because the people of Karare want to know when the KDF are going to vacate that land. Thank you very much.
Senator Eddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary question is on question number 3, set by the Senator of Kisumu, Senator Ojienda. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to know from the CS, at a point where the national security has failed, whether because of capacity or other misgivings, and then KDF has come in, like what we saw last year during the Gen Z protests. KDF has taken over to make sure that they can ensure there is peace and there is stability. Do they also take over the mess that has been created by inadequacy of the national security organ? Like the messes that we saw where, for instance, young people were killed and property were destroyed. Does that assumption only limit KDF to the issue of dealing with restoring peace, or does it extend to dealing with the mess that has been created at that time by the national security organ? And if that is so, then what does the ministry think of dealing with the mess that was created at that time, including what this House passed on the resolution of compensating young people who were affected and were killed during that protest? And this House has pronounced itself through a resolution on dealing with those messes. Is the ministry taking over that because the national security organs failed as demonstrated? Thank you, Chair.
Senator Kathuri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I really want to congratulate our CS, Senator Soipan, who before she was appointed as CS, she was one of us in this House, Mr. Speaker, and she has not let us down this far. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is, actually first is to really congratulate the KDF joint operation in the North Rift and the National Police Service, because they restored normalcy in the North Rift, Baringo area, Samburu, the Baragoi area. For the first time, shops are open in that area, Mr. Speaker. So I really want to thank them for that joint operation. But, Honorable Speaker, the other areas, sometimes I get restrained to talk about other areas, especially where I come from, Mr. Speaker. But to request whether the National Security Council can also consider also deploying the KDF to other areas which have similar problems with North Rift, especially the border between Nyambene region of Meru County and the Isiolo-Samburu border, Mr. Speaker. If they can at least consider even doing an operation to wipe out or to weed out the illegal arms which are in that area. Mr. Speaker, because what happened, to give them a hand start, is when the bandits left North Rift and Samburu, the only safe haven that they have now is the Isiolo, the Samburu, bordering Meru, and that region. So they left North Rift and came to our region, Mr. Speaker. So they are really terrorizing us, and whether maybe they can consider bringing a same operation in that border so that also our people can live in peace, Honorable Speaker. I thank you.
Senator Kamau.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also ask a supplementary question. Honorable Speaker, I wanted to know from the Minister, what is the Minister of Defense doing, and whether the CS is aware that on 13th of March 2025, a heavily armed militia, believed to be Al-Shabaab, invaded a village in Mangai, in Kiunga, a village in Mangai, in Basuba ward in Lamu County, and that they were in pursuit of an area chief and NPR, who helps in maintaining law and order in that area. Honorable Speaker, it is believed that the militia got an opportunity to address members of the public and force them to even take the days that they were having. Honorable Speaker, since then, the members of the public have been living in fear in that area of not knowing where the militias will strike next and what will happen. Honorable Speaker, I wanted to know from the Minister, what is the Ministry doing to see to it that they safeguard those citizens that live in those areas? Final question, Mr. Speaker. I want
entitled
it is
only one.
In addition to that, it is
no, you cannot add, Honorable Senator.
I'm finishing, Honorable Speaker. Let me finish.
Already finished.
Kindly,
Senator
it is
Boni?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to request the CS to take, when you go back to the generals, to take our greetings and our appreciation for their professionalism and discipline as a unit of security in this country. Having said that, I'm a little bit apprehensive listening to you and reading the Constitution. It is not clear. Minister, once the forces are deployed, what self-propelling mechanism has the National Security Council put in place to ensure that once they are deployed, they do not roll into taking over government?
Senator Wambua.
Thank you, the Speaker. The Speaker, you cannot fail to notice that Senator Medu today is very, very well dressed. The hair looks good. Mr. Speaker, there's one thing, the Speaker, that I have not told you. It's a lot of things I have not told you. I have not told this House. That at some point in my life, I lived in the barracks. My father is a former Army officer, that time Army, Kenya Army. And so matters security and matters defense are very close to my heart. The Speaker, the world over, armies are trained basically to do three things. Basically, whether it's explicit or not, but basically do three things. One is to fight. Two is to kill, and 3 is to die for the motherland. That is the basic training of any army anywhere in the world, including Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I would want to know from the CS, our colleague, Senator Soipan Tuya. When in July 2024, the KDF was unleashed on our streets, first of all, what battalion is it that was released to the streets? What was the mandate of their mission? Because the mandate must be very, very clear. And Mr. Speaker, the Gazette notice that released the KDF to the streets, has it been revoked, or are they in the streets in perpetuity? Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Senator Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, when the minister was answering, she gave 2 examples and said in the North Rift, where they were carrying out Maliza Uhalifu operation, the Inspector General of Police was in charge, and the defense forces were supporting. In our neighbor, Lamu County, when they were doing Amani Boning operation, it is the Chief of Defense Forces who was in command. The question I wanted to ask the minister, we have the highest respect for our defense forces as a nation, and the discipline and the respect, we admire them. But what we wanted to know, in fact, the question is not on their primary duties, which is the territorial protection of this nation. The question always arises on their secondary duties, which is, getting into civilian mix, and you have explained it very well. Why is it that you don't have a law specific for that? Don't quote the Constitution. Constitution gives general principles. Why don't you have a law specific on deployment of the army for civilian purposes? And the reason I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, is that when you go to some projects, even construction projects, you are told these ones are not going to be advertised. It's the army which will do it. We have no doubt that the army can do it. But why isn't there a proper legal framework which is going to be, debated by the representatives of the people and made clear? And this is a suggestion, Honorable CS, that it is time, because all these questions are around the law, the application of how does the army get mixed with civilian life. I submit, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Majaya.
Asante mstahiki Spika. Mstahiki Spika, nataka kuuliza swali kwa waziri. Waziri, swali ambalo nataka kuuliza ni kwamba kuna sehemu kubwa sana ya shamba ambalo wale wanajeshi wa Mariakani Army Barracks wamelichukua ama wanaishi hapo. Sehemu kubwa sana ya shamba ambapo wale familia husika imeweza kutupwa nje, na wamejaribu sana kuweza kupata hiyo ardhi yao, na mpaka hivi sasa bado hawajaipata. Wizara yako imechukua hatua gani kuona kwamba lile shamba ambalo ile familia imedhulumiwa pale Mariakani na alafu imedhulumiwa na wanajeshi ambao wananchi sasa hawawezi kufanya chochote kwa sababu ni wanajeshi ndio wanaketi hapo, na ile shamba na hakika unajua ya kwamba ile shamba wakati ami ikienda pale, wananchi wenyewe walikuwa wanaishi pale kama familia. Ni hatua gani umechukua kuregesha hiyo shamba kwa wale wakaazi ama wenyewe hiyo shamba wanaoishi hapo Mariakani, ile familia? Umefanya hatua gani kuona kwamba hiyo shamba imeweza kurudi kwao? Asante.
Senator Mondege. Senator Murgo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I have a question about North Rift situation. The situation definitely CS is very conducive and it is quiet now. But once in a while, we get a reaction. I mean, there is no perfection yet. You will find that maybe one of those thugs will go to one side and do something that is unexpected. But the reaction from KDF is equally disastrous because they beat people all over generally and even kill and shoot cows and all this. Could this be a matter of a camp or a unit overstaying in a place until probably they begin to not be up to what they went for? Because it seems like they are now not up to what they went for, but other things that are equally violent.
Senator Mofire.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question is to our former colleague, CS Soipan Tuya. Honorable Speaker, there is a very old tradition in this country that whenever we have a recruitment, especially the military recruitment, there is a lot of hue and cry from the public where people will go to an extent of even disposing their property to get money so that their sons and daughters can be recruited in the military. This, Honorable Speaker, has created a very imbalanced recruitment because only those who can afford to pay for that recruitment get their sons and daughters recruited in the military. We have had cases where parents have lost money through fraudsters. You get somebody who has requests you to get him some money so that maybe your son or daughter can be recruited in the military. In this case, Honorable Speaker, we have denied our poor parents an opportunity to get their sons and daughters serve in the military. So what is this that the ministry is doing? Because this is cancerous. It has been with us for a very long time. I don't know. I have not even captured any sentiment from the ministry for that matter and raising that pertinent issue that is affecting our parents across the country. What is your ministry doing to make sure that this bad habit stops forthwith?
Now, before I allow the Honorable CS to respond, Honorable Senators, allow me to remind you that a supplementary question is a question that flows from the primary question. Now, the questions by Senator Mohamed Chute, Senator Mazayo of Kilifi, and Senator Mofire do not qualify to be supplementary questions. However, I will allow the Honorable CS, if she's able to adequately respond to those three questions, you may proceed to respond as you respond to the other supplementary questions. If you're not in a position, you can undertake to provide a more detailed response to those three questions. Honorable CS, you may now take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The questions are a bit too many, but I will give an attempt to respond to all of them adequately. And I'll go in order of the way they were posed to me. The question by the Honorable Senator Tom Ojenda on what the threshold is for the KDF stepping in to contain threats, internal threats, in support of the National Police Service. And Mr. Speaker, I had demonstrated that there is a continuous engagement between the national security organs through the National Security Council and the National Security Committee, and we deal with situational analysis of security situations on a very regular basis. So this is just to assure the country and this House that in as much as we don't have a scientific threshold to this effect, any matters that require the intervention of KDF, and this has been demonstrated over time, are done in a timely fashion. And this is in support of the National Police Service. And it is not to say that the police are not doing their work. It is because we have serious security challenges that emerge every so often, and that support then is required from the Kenya Defence Forces. The second question, Mr. Speaker, was asked by, I'm sorry, I did not indicate the name of the senator, who was asking what other duties, no, this is Senator Ojenda still, what other duties, apart from the KDF sitting to wait for
Senator Ojenda, may you listen to the CS in silence.
The Honorable Senator, Professor, Senior Counsel Tom Ojenda, Senator for Kisumu County. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, the KDF, our soldiers don't just sit in the barracks. There is a lot of involvement in humanitarian and civic activities all across the country in support of communities, and this is in the area of water security, schools, school infrastructure, and roads. And I'm sure we can attest to this at the various levels of involvement of the KDF in different parts of the country. Mr. Speaker, we also have a very serious defense industry unit of the KDF, where we have semi-autonomous government agencies, an example being the Kenya Meat Commission, and the Kenya Ordnance Factories, KOFSI, which engage in a number of activities away from fighting and the core mandate of our personnel. Mr. Speaker, the question by the Senator of Nairobi, Honorable Sifuna, on what was inaccurate about the article by the Nation Media Group. Mr. Speaker, to the extent that the article referred to a military coup, I can only say that it is indeed baseless, it is inaccurate, and reckless. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, question by Senator Chute, in as much as it has been declared inadmissible by the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are seized of the matter of the Karare land, and I want to appreciate the support of the Senator. We have had discussions, even this morning. He accosted me as I was walking into the House, and we are going to advance the discussions as agreed, Mr. Speaker, and we will need the support of the leadership of Marsabit County because the military base that is intended to be set up in Marsabit is for the interest of the Kenyans, the Kenya population in general, and more specifically, those communities affected by insecurity situations in Marsabit. The other interests espoused by the different parties are also pertinent, and we are going to address that through the means that we have agreed on. Honorable Senator for Migori, on the question of the limits of what KDF should and can do once deployed, Mr. Speaker, the definition of deployment is very clear, as stated under the Constitution, and KDF does not undertake investigations, does not undertake any form of arrest, or dealing with any internal criminal liability issues. There are institutions that are tasked with that mandate, and the role of the KDF then is restricted to restoring stability and leave all these other issues to the relevant agencies of government, Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Deputy Speaker, Senator Kaduri, thank you for admitting that the support of KDF to the National Police Service is indeed working in the North Rift, and this has been attested to by the Senator for West Pokot County. We appreciate that feedback. And I want to say that, unfortunately, we also cannot be everywhere as KDF. But like I said, in instances where the insecurity has gone down in the North Rift but is escalating in other parts of the country, that is noted, Mr. Speaker. And these are the issues that are in constant deliberation between the national security organs, and where need be, and the procedures are very clear, KDF, if called upon, will then come in to support the National Police Service in the areas that were stated, Isiolo, Meru, and these other parts of the country where the internal strife seems to be escalating in as much as the North Rift is looking good. Senator Thuku of Lamu, the incident, a very fresh incident of March 13th. Yes, I'm aware of the incident in Kiunga, and it is a matter that is actively under investigation. And like I said, the KDF is actively deployed in Lamu under the Operation Amani Boni, and I will therefore not wish to comment on the processes that are undergoing with regards to this specific case of invasion in Lamu that involved the chiefs and other people in the area. But Mr. Speaker, I would like the Senator to rest assured that the matter is actively under investigation, and I'm sure he knows, as the Senator of Lamu, how to plug himself in and know what is happening, and I invite him to have a discussion outside this house. The Honorable Senator for Kakamega County, I will pass the greetings to the generals, and they could, most probably they are watching, and thank you for appreciating their role. The scope and duration for deployment of KDF is clearly spelled out. Even the deployment that happened on June 25th, you know it involves a court matter, which is still active in court. And the scope, as defined by the Constitution and the relevant laws, cannot allow for a degeneration, because even the duration is clearly defined as to how long the KDF then continue to be deployed in these situations. The National Security Council is also properly designed to monitor constantly, and remember, this is a multi-agency outfit, to make sure that the deployments remain within the confines of the Constitution. Senator for Kitui County, Honorable Wambua. The question on the confines of the operation. I think the question is as to whether the Gazette still subsists for the deployment of June 25th. The parameters for June 25th are very clear, again, like I mentioned. There is a court case. There were Gazette notices, 2 Gazette notices issued by the Cabinet Secretary then, defining, as required by the court directive, defining the scope, the duration, and the confines within which the KDF was to operationalize the deployment. And the case, again, is actively in court. As to the details of the battalions and mandate, that is operational, and I will not comment on that. But Honorable Speaker, I think the point here is to assure the nation and to assure this House that the deployments are not arbitrary, the deployments are well thought out, and the oversight role of the National Assembly, as is required for gazettement and also defining the scope and duration, does not give room for misuse of the deployment operations. Senator Mungatana, thank you for expressing your respect for the force, KDF. Your question on why we don't have a law specific to define this secondary role of KDF. Indeed, we do have a law, the Kenya Defence Forces Act, the Part 2 of the Act, which is sections 32, 33 through to 35, does define the parameters, the scope of engagement, the code of conduct, who takes command for the various levels of deployment. But of course, again, Honorable Senator, this House is at liberty to review and ensure that any gaps that there are, then we should make sure, and we will be happy to engage to seal any loopholes that may be. But as it were, the Constitution, read together with the KDF Act, does provide the parameters of operationalizing the deployments. Senator Madzayo, Senator, tuko na kesi nyingi ambazo ziko na shida across the country kuhusiana na KDF, lakini ya Mariakani sina habari nayo. So utaweza kunielezea kwa sababu I'm not aware of any row that exists between KDF and our operation space at Mariakani. But you're welcome to bring that to the fore, if indeed there is any such dispute between us and the community in Mariakani. Senator Murgor of West Pokot County. Senator, I appreciate again you have stated that the area is quiet, the North Rift is quieter, it's more conducive, but it is not devoid of challenges. And we engage on a very constant basis with our command at the North Rift. We have dealt with a few cases. So should you have any that is outstanding, please bring it to the fore. We have dealt with some cases, and we are still ready to deal with any that may be there. As indeed you have said, there is a lot of progress, but we have challenges here and there, and we can address them as they come. The Honorable Senator for Tharaka Nithi, the issue of recruitment. Mr. Speaker, allow me to say that sometime late last year, we got a fully fledged notification of recruitment with all the logos of the KDF and the ministry published out there. And we had no such recruitment going on. So we have fraudsters out there who dupe Kenyans into believing that actually we have Kenyans masquerading as generals out there with full uniform, full ranks, and the likes. With that said, Mr. Speaker, I cannot also say that there are no challenges that we need to address with the system of recruitment. And I want to say that the Defense Council, which I chair, is currently working on a watertight system of recruitment because the principles of national security that I mentioned, one of the key principles of national security is that the recruitment by the national security organs must reflect the diversity of the Kenyan people and must be in equitable proportions. We are working around the clock, and I know there is, without preempting, there is a question that has been raised on the same by this House, and when the time comes, I'll give details on the measures we are taking to seal the loopholes that do exist with our recruitment processes. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wabua, you had your supplementary question. And you know our rules standing on that. You only need to ask one. What is it that you want to say again?
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for indulging me. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of asking any supplementary question is to get an answer. So if you ask a supplementary question and you don't get an answer, then there is no point.
Clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to seek clarification. Mr. Speaker, and I don't want to push the CS to do things that maybe she's not allowed to do. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to understand, on my own behalf and on behalf of the people of Kenya, what is so secretive about just telling Kenyans what brigade or what battalion is engaged in whatever operation is taking place anywhere in the country? Mr. Speaker, the question was very specific. What battalion was deployed to deal with the cases on the streets in July? I think, Mr. Speaker, that question was the issue of Gazette notice. It's either just to say the Gazette notice has been lifted or it is still in force. Mr. Speaker, I don't see any issues with that. Mr. Speaker, let's get those answers. They're important for the people of this country. Thank you.
Senator Wambua, you know you have asked a question and then you're also giving yourself answers. What she should answer. Therefore, allow the CS to just make a comment on that operation in July last year. Madam CS, if you are not ready, then we can also get another.
I am very ready, Mr. Speaker. Yes, indeed, Senator Wambua. What restricts me from responding to your question is provisions of the law on limitation of information under the KDF law, and the questions on capacity and disposition of deployment falls under that limitation. So that is why I cannot extend beyond that. On the question on whether the deployment has been revoked, no, the deployment has not been revoked. There is a matter actively in court, but I would also want us to, again, remember that the deployment of June 25th is in support of the National Police Service, just like the other secondary operations that are within the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Also, I'll request Senator Wambua, if you are not really satisfied, you can just walk to the office and then you can interact with the... No, I'm just...
Mr. Speaker, allow me to invite Senator Wambua.
Actually, I was making the way for him so that he can be able to reach your office. And you have been invited by the CS. Therefore, I think you can now do that. Senator Veronica Waheti, Nduati.
Honorable CS, welcome back to the House, where you served for a few days, and congratulations on your new appointment. Lamu County is one of those counties that have experienced violent extremism. And we would want to know what is the current security situation in Lamu. Is KDF still actively deployed in Lamu? And whether the Somali border has been closed or is still open? And what is the current status of that deployment at Lamu County?
Honorable CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Yes, the situation of Lamu, the security situation remains a key involvement of the KDF, and the Operation Amani Boni is actively ongoing, as I had indicated, and the border remains closed.
Honorable CS, from my dashboard, you have no other supplementary questions. There are no other interventions. And therefore, I want to really congratulate you for availing yourself to the Senate and satisfactorily responding to all the supplementary questions without to and fro, forth and back. And this is a clear demonstration that women, the Kenya women, can be able to handle even the most extraneous duties. And I want to thank you and your peers again, you are our former colleagues. The way you are working together in that gelling is what we need in the ministries. So therefore, I don't want to say that it's because you are former registrators that you're able to know the issues that are facing Kenyans. So thank you very much indeed for your time. All the best as you serve Kenyans. Senator Haji Abdu Haji, kindly approach the table.